Welcome to Conversations with Toy, a blogcast tackling life one episode at a time. This is the time to air out life's craziest moments. This space is all about speaking about life's hang-ups and ways in which we can leave better than when we started. Topics are all about ways we can find space to be better in life, love, mental space, and health.
Happy Friday. I hope that you are having such an amazing week. We are down to the literal wire. It is New Year's Eve. Tomorrow is New Year's Day. And so there is a lot to unpack with everything that's going on. I want to say, first of all, welcome to another episode of Conversations with Toy. If this is your first time, welcome to the podcast. We are here. We're glad that you are here. And every week we talk about different conversations, whether that be about family, whether that be about your friends, relationships. We really cover it all. This week we are talking about grandparents and the impact that grandparents make on children's lives. We have Gramps Jeffrey. He is an amazing, and I mean an amazing children's book writer and illustrator. And he talks about basically using his own relationship with his actual grandchildren. He uses his grandchildren in the illustration of his book as he talks about not wanting to be three. So we just have an amazing episode for you today. So, of course, we're going to talk about grandparents and what grandparents mean to grandchildren. I'm going to talk about my own experiences with my own grandparents. But as I wanted to be clear is that with New Year's Eve and New Year's Day around the corner, I wanted to make sure that we understood that there are going to be so many, and even I am always a goal-oriented person. I've been this way since I was probably, I want to say like in the second grade at the very least, to my earliest recollection. And, you know, always being about setting goals, trying to figure out what is the next steps for me. That is very natural. And for some people, that's not something that they naturally gravitate towards. There are some people who struggle with what are the goals to be made? How do I even start off my goals? What if I have so many different talents? How do I fine tune that? And I'm going to tell you right now, we've learned from the last 2 years with this pandemic that, you know, having goals is still important regardless, but also being gentle with yourself, realizing that you can't accomplish everything in timing. And we've had to do a lot of pivoting. We've had to do a lot of adjusting with life, just how everything has been happening. So don't be so hard on yourself if you wake up on New Year's Day and you don't have everything in line and you're not moving towards every goal at every possible second. So don't be so super concerned with yourself. Like, allow yourself to have that breathing room. New Year's Day really is honestly a celebration and really should be focused on that. I'm not telling you not to hit your goals hard. I'm not telling you to get up and, and just do whatever not do anything. But also keep in mind that New Year's Day is supposed to be a celebration. Our family has recently been hit with COVID, so we won't be having our normal celebration every year. No matter when the world was open up or not, I would have a celebration for our family. That means normally for just the people that live in our house. There have been times when we've had other people around as well. So yes, this will be the first year by which we will not be having our normal store celebration. In times past, I would have I would decorate our house. I would have, different desserts. I would make them myself. We would have big celebrations, huge celebrations. Again, this would be just the people in our home. This year, we're going to be celebrating probably with some Tylenol and ibuprofen. We are still struggling and trying to recover. So it won't be a big turn up at all. But one thing I am super grateful just for, even if we are together and we are quarantining, harder than normal, even if we are together and we're not having a big celebration, just for us to be together, because there's some families that can't say that. And what I'm grateful for is, as some of my extended family members have gotten it recently as well, is that everybody is still recovering and recovering well. Whether you believe in the vaccinations or not, for our particular family, having those vaccinations is saving us from having worse symptoms. And so with that, we are very grateful that it hasn't been as bad. I mean, there have been moments when it has been intense, but it hasn't been to the point where we're not able to breathe or anything like that. And again, I've said this plenty of episodes. You can catch them. We're in season 5, so there's plenty of episodes. But a lot of my extended family who had originally gotten in the first place didn't do as well. And so anything that can prevent anybody from being on a ventilator or passing away or any of these extreme reactions is definitely ideal. And so continue to keep our family lifted up in prayer. And when I say my family, I do mean those who live in my home, and then my other family members who have been diagnosed with it recently. I've been getting text messages and phone calls from people and realizing just how much more people have been getting sick in this last few days. This new variant is very contagious. It's weird because I've been seeing the memes and like the TikToks that were saying we went through 2 years and didn't get anything, was very strategic about how we moved and continue. It's not like the people that I'm around have just been like let caution to the wind. Like, we all did our part, and now we're here at this point where this particular strain is so contagious that no matter how much we tried to be cautious, we still ended up getting it. So it's just a weird flow right now. And but we're grateful, again, being grateful that, again, we're healthy, we're together. Like I said, with our episode for today, we have Gramps Jeffrey. He is here. He is going to talk about his book. The title of the book is I Don't Want to Turn 3. It is an amazing children's book. It basically highlights the way to talk about getting, when 3-year-olds become that magical age, when they start to touch on they start to touch that era of responsibility, when you start introducing things like, sharing, and they start understanding little things and how they relate to the world. Like, that is how the book is really transforming the idea and having these conversations with the younger generation, younger children. And, he illustrates this so well, but it's very easy to do because he talks about it and uses it from his perspective of his own grandchildren. And we talk about his relationship with his grandchildren, the things that he's been able to do with them, and being super creative, like how super creative he has been, obviously just as a grandparent in general, but then also wrapping that around the pandemic and things that he and his wife have been able to do. And we talk about that in today's episode. And so if you're a grandparent or if you're a parent, this would be a great episode to kind of tune in, because there's some things that we talk about when we talk about discipline and how discipline has changed over the years. We get right into the conversations about, and he even gives credit to his children, saying that they are better parents than him and his wife. And you never normally hear that from an older generation. An older generation will tell you that they are the end all be all. They're the parents that kind of, were stopped parenting, and now this new generation of parents are no longer parents, because of parenting now includes being respectful of children and their autonomy of their body and who they are. Some older generation, not all, but some older generation grandparents and parents don't give the younger generation any type of a high five, but he does, and it's such a refreshing thing to hear. So go ahead and give us a tune in for today. Even if you're not a parent and you're just like wanting to listen to the conversation about, again, the evolution of how parenting has changed, because I'm sure even if you're not a parent yourself, you can recognize and understand that, because just times have changed, and you have to be a little bit more understanding and more direct and have conversations that parents back in my generation, my parents didn't necessarily do, their parents didn't do. And so it's a beautiful flow of life and just how things are just evolving. And I'm a firm believer of taking some of the aspects of the old school way, as people would say, and mixing it in with some of the new, because we need a combination of both. really to try to find a way to parent. And really, there isn't any right way or wrong way to parent outside of child abuse. Anything that becomes abusive emotionally, mentally, physically, those things are, in my opinion, are completely off limits and should not be included in anyone's parenting regimen. But there are a million different ways to get the same results. And as long as you're leading with love, and love does not hurt, the love does not hurt in any aspect. And that's why I say emotionally, mentally, and physically. We have to keep that in perspective. So this is not the conversation to tell you how to parent. There will be so many debates about what is correct and what's not correct. If you are thinking that that's the way that we're going in this conversation, we are not. But grandparents hold a special light and a special heart in a grandchild's life. And that's why it's imperative when I hear parents, and even Gramps talks about it in today's episode, when we talk about, the grandparents who are just like, listen, I've raised my children. I don't have anything else to give. That's on y'all. Y'all do you. I'm going to do me. There's such a beautifulness that grandparents bring to the life of a parent, meaning their support to the child who is raising their grandchildren is very important, as well as the relationship that they have with the actual grandchild. Grandchildren really do gravitate towards those memories of togetherness. And when it's not there, they also gravitate and remember that as well. There are some children who unfortunately don't have the privilege of being able to say they grew up with a grandparent, meaning that their grandparent may necessarily not be raising them, but they're active. Active grandparenting is a beautiful thing, and the lack thereof is very stark. To know that there's grandparents who just are so, I've raised my own, and so now I don't have to do anything for yours. That is one of my own personal pet peeves. When it comes to the older generation who feel like, oh, I've already done my part. There's a difference between a child asking you to raise your child or asking you to be someone who kind of just encourages your children to make the right decisions. Grandparents have such a great role in how they influence a child. I know growing up, I actually even was around my great grandparents, and the whole of my great grandparents not being here is very much felt. Their love and support of just my great grandparents have been immensely prevalent in my life. And then when you add my grandparents, I have so many memories of doing things with both sets of grandparents, whether it was having spaghetti with my mother's mother, and just living with her and remember playing with her and waiting for her to come home from work, or with my dad's mother and father who were hands-on. They would pick me up if I needed to be picked up. We lived at some point 5 doors away from them, so I could walk up the street and see them, or my, any of my other family members at any given time. And so that closeness that you have, and those memories that you have, and those stories that you have they're so prevalent when you get older. As I've gotten older, I've had nothing but the most appreciation, because I realize it's a blessing to say that you've had those experiences with a grandparent. So as we go into the conversation with Gramps is such an amazing man who is, again, a grandfather of himself, and he teaches through that, the relationship with his grandchildren. And I'm hoping that, again, there's some tidbits and some little innuendos that I hope that you apply to your life. If you are a grandparent that is listening in, that you will gravitate towards doing more with your grandchildren and making those memories. If you are a parent, that you get encouraged that the things that you're doing now, even if you've never heard from your parent or any elder in your life, that you're doing an amazing job. Listen, as a parent myself, you doing the best that you can, and it's a scary thought, because you're like, what am I doing? I don't know what I'm doing. How am I going to get from point A to point B and make sure that I'm effective in my children's lives? But then when you hear somebody say you're doing a great job, or you may not never hear that, I'm just going to tell you, as a parent, as long as you're trying, as long as you're being open with your children, as long as you're apologizing, and then when you apologize for the things that you're saying or you're doing is wrong, make the actual change, because that is the true essence of showing an apology. is actually showing that change. So let's get into this episode. Thank you, Gramps, for being a part of this conversation. For all of our listeners, we truly, truly appreciate all of the love and support that you give, whether you share the episode, whether you review an episode, or just downloading the episode is amazing as well. So we appreciate you. We wish you nothing but the absolute best and success in your 2022. And we are so grateful to be still rocking out with you season 5. And we are grateful. And so let's get into this episode.
All right, Conversations with Toy Family, our community of listeners. We have an amazing treat today. We have Gramps. He is here to talk about his book. He's here to talk. Listen, if you are a parent, a grandparent, or a proxy parent, there's people who stand in the gap as parents or stand in the gap as grandparents. We salute you. We need more of you. We're glad that you're here. We have a great conversation for today. We're going to talk about some of the fundamental things that parents, grandparents are discovering with their children and how they lead. And listen, Gramps is here to tell his story with his amazing book. Gramps, take it away.
Thanks so much for inviting me. My name's Gramps Jeffrey, and my most recent book is I Don't Want to Turn 3. And, why did I write this book? It's living this past year because of the pandemic. It was caused by the COVID-19 and isolation, except for being able to be with my family. It gave me a special time to watch and interact with all these grandkids. I got to tell you, what a trip that was. All 6 of my grandkids have completely different personalities. The one thing they do have in common is they have a sense of curiosity and how excited they get when they do accomplish something. So watching them grow year to year and how they interact with each other is really the basis for this book.
And you said you had 6 grandchildren?
Yes, I've got, I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've got 2 of them here. I've got 2 of them in Austin, Texas, and 2 in Orlando, Florida. So this was a real challenge with this COVID to keep these relationships going.
Yeah, I was about to say, how did you have that? How did you make that work? Because they're kind of spread out and not everybody is kind of close. So how did you manage that?
Well, what's interesting is I had them all here for about 6 weeks during the COVID, then they went away. So we had a chance to really spend some time with them. And the one thing that all of these kids, and I don't know why, but all these 2, 3, 4, 5-year-olds, they love dinosaurs. Now, I don't know if your kids like dinosaurs.
They do.
But every kid I know loves dinosaurs. So we're trying to figure out what is the easiest way to keep in touch for the kids that weren't living in the same town we were? Because, when I was growing up, my family was all around. My uncle lived up the street. My grandmother lived a couple blocks away. They were all there. But in today's world, with us scattered all over the United States, it's a whole different thing. So I hit on this. Everybody loved these dinosaurs. So what we decided to do when all the kids left town is we decided to take 6 of our dinosaurs, and every night we put them someplace else in the house. So for instance, the dinosaurs were in the refrigerator eating blueberries. We had the dinosaurs at the sink with grandma washing dishes and they had soap on their noses. We had the dinosaurs playing the piano. We had the dinosaurs walking up the steps. So we had 50 different things within our house and outside our house that the dinosaurs did every night. Well, as grandparents well know, little kids don't call you. You got to call them. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
But what happened was, because of this interest that they had in all these dinosaurs, when they were going to bed, they made it a point to call us. So they would call my wife on her iPhone, for FaceTime, and they would say, "Where's Gramps? Where's Gramps? We've got to see what dinosaurs are doing tonight." So that's how we kept in touch. And it happened. The Orlando kids called every night. The Austin kids called every night because they wanted to see what the dinosaurs were doing, every night. Why? Because they were familiar with our house. What were they doing that night? So I would urge your listeners, if they've got kids that are outside of where they can, put their hands around them, is to come up with an idea, something like that, to get them to call you. Because once they start calling you, it's a whole different ballgame than you calling them when they're busy doing something. So that's how we kept in touch.
That's pretty amazing and very interactive that you actually decided to do that, because I think all kids of all ages, my kids are a little older, 12, 10, and 7, and they still love dinosaurs. And so that's really amazing that you were able to tie that all the way in, because like you said, that's completely interactive.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to come up with a way. And I'm sure there's other things that you do. I mean, now that the dinosaur phase is over, our kids, our two boys in Orlando, they love trucks. So we do something like that with trucks, whether it's a dump truck or the kids that are in Austin, Texas, because they live right near a train track, they love trains. So, they bring out their trains at night and we take our trains and we kind of play with the trains back and forth. So, you just got to keep in touch, because don't forget, you only have 18 years with these kids, and that goes, decades go very quickly. And if you don't establish a kind of relationship when they're young, you may lose it. So as you probably can remember, there are lots of thoughts and things that you remember when you were a little kid, when you're in your 20s and 30s and 40s, certain events. So that really is the impact of how grandparents need to be with their kids, is what kind of impact can they use that these kids are going to remember, 20 years from now.
That is so true. My grandparents lived 5 houses from our house. All of my aunts and uncles were in the same town. We were very close. And I still remember stories of things that we interacted and things that happened that I can share with my kids. And so it works all the same. You're definitely hitting that right on the head. Let's get into your book of the review of I Don't Want to Turn 3. Why did you name this book, I Don't Want to Turn 3?
Because I was watching these kids as they were, 1, 2, and 3 years old. And, they were having to take on more responsibility. So I guess the real question is, at what age do we all begin to take on responsibility for our actions? Is it 3 years old? Is it 13 years old? Is it 23? I'm a baby boomer, and I got plenty of people my age that are 63 that still don't take responsibility.
Right, I'm 40,
for action.
And people don't take their responsibility either.
Yeah, so that really is the why I wrote I Don't Want to Turn 3, because I could see that that was the age when these kids were like, I don't know if I really want to take responsibility. It's more fun to let mommy take responsibility.
And are you talking about responsibility like and sharing, or like little kitty chores, like, pull your sheets up on your bed? Like, what is your level of responsibility? Because when you're 2 and 3, that's when you first begin to start that process of engaging with other people and realizing what that means.
Yeah, I think it's the whole thing of sharing. When do you start to learn that it's just not me, it's us, and that's really, it's very difficult for parents to see that with toddlers. When do they understand the difference between me and us? And another reason I thought 3 was good, because as a baby boomer myself, trying to understand the world, how has it evolved since I was 3 years old? It's also part of the story. My parents, they didn't have cell phones, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have cable TV. They didn't have remotes. I was my dad's remote. He'd say, son, go change the channel. And I became the remote. So, the whole atmosphere of how we grew up versus how these kids are growing up now is something else. My parents' definition of discipline is quite different than the parents of today. Has today's world made it a better place for children to grow up? Yeah, I'll let your listeners kind of answer that question. How are they growing up compared to how we were treated? That really is the question. Now, in my opinion, these kids that are growing up, the 2, 3, 4-year-old, they are the smartest generation ever.
Yes.
Ever. Us baby boomers, we think we're a smart generation. We're not at all compared to these little kids coming up. And I think that's caused by several different reasons. One is, they are exposed to the internet. They are exposed to iPads. They are exposed to outside information. So they learn much sooner, much clearer, with those, and then it's up to the parents and the grandparents to put in the real world kind of thing into what they're learning online. But they have this opportunity. They are just so much smarter than we ever were. And our biggest challenge is, how do you keep them motivated? How do you keep them growing? And so that's another thing that, that's another reason why I titled I Don't Want to Turn 3, is this generation is just so much better than the ones in the past.
Yeah. I remember when I first started to have my first child, and I was like very dead set on telling my husband that I did not want them exposed to the electronics so early just because they are sponges. They soak it all up. And once you teach a child how to swipe and how to touch and how to do all those different things, and honestly, you don't even really have to teach them. You kind of just put it in front of them and they just have a sense of knowing. And they catch on so quickly. And I remember when we made that leap from the learning pads into the actual iPads and phones, and it was a night and day switch. They just gravitated and got it so fast.
Oh yeah, the grandmother asked the 9-year-old, "How do I do this? How to do that?" It really is a smart way to do it. Now, there are lots of things that I think have been a plus for this whole internet world. My 6-year-old grandson Levi, somehow he got into the game Minecraft. I don't know if you're familiar with Minecraft, but it's something that's been around for 20 years or so. And he is just this expert in Minecraft. And he knows all the terms and everything like that. And he's, spends an hour a day doing his Minecraft thing, and he gets upset when somebody bothers him when he's doing it. Okay, but it's turned out to be a plus, because what has happened is he has got his father now involved in Minecraft. And so it's a real bonding thing. When his dad comes home from work, the two of them get on for an hour and they play Minecraft together. Okay, now this is a great thing to do, because in a sense, Levi had said to his dad and his mom, because his dad's a huge football fan and he watches football right and left and basketball, and really sports guy. And Levi says, "I'm not really interested in that. I don't want to sit there and watch football with dad all day." But he's got this bonding thing now going with his dad, that he can play this Minecraft. Now, at the same time, his mother says to him, "Well, if you don't like football, you don't like basketball, what kind of sports do you like?" He says, "I like bowling." And she says, "What? Bowling? Where did you get that idea? We have never talked about bowling in our house. We have never gone bowling. Why all of a sudden are you excited about bowling?" Well, that's a grandfather's influence, because when they come over to our house, we've got the Wii. I don't know if you remember Wii.
Oh no, we still have that Wii, and bowling is our favorite game, between that and jousting.
Yeah. So when Levi comes over to our house, we get out the Wii and we do the tennis, and we do the golf, and we do the bowling, and we do the boxing. He loves that, but he has got hooked on bowling. So that is something that whenever he comes over, he says, "Let's get the Wii on, let's go bowling." But it was so funny that his mother last week had no idea that he had this interest in bowling, and that was one of the influences of grandparents. So I urge grandparents to figure out how can you influence these kids. If he grows up to be a great bowler, wonderful, but at least it gives him an alternative to what he's doing at home.
That's true. I like to pick the brains of those who I find to be grandparents, because you guys have already raised a set of children. You've already done the things that we're starting the process of doing. And I know in the book, you're talking about this, going from baby into really stepping into the understanding of, what's right and what's wrong, or not necessarily what's right or what's wrong, but just that responsibility of like the sharing. And, when the child turns 3, the world opens up a little differently for that child. How is it, being a grandparent versus when you were a parent, and that you've seen that opening of that age? How different is that for you?
Oh, it's much different. You're very protective when you're raising your kids, and you make a lot of mistakes.
Yes.
Luckily for me, our kids turned out okay, and they're much better parents than we were. And one example is discipline. I mean, like, for instance, how do you discipline your kids? When they do something bad, what do you do?
What do I do?
Yeah.
Oh, we have conversations. We talk about what it is that they've done wrong. We talk about the scenarios of which they could have done things differently. We try not to raise our voices. We try to have more just of a dialogue and a learning experience compared to where my parents taught me. There was just straight discipline. It was like, you knew what you were doing, you did it wrong, and now this is the consequence. We still give out consequences, but we want them to learn away from, this consequence happening, and actually learning how to interact, especially because if it's a life lesson, you want them to learn so they can take that life lesson with them.
Now this is a real evolution, because my kids discipline their kids by putting them in timeout. They and the kids are scared to death to go to timeout, because it
Oh, well,
takes
that's
them away.
good.
It takes them away from the other kids and puts them in a corner looking by themselves. But if you think about the whole way discipline has evolved, now I grew up in the 50s and the 60s. Okay. My parents were part of the greatest generation ever. They're the ones that saved the world. They're the ones that saved democracy.
Right.
They went through the Depression, and they went on to World War II, and they saved the world. So they were a very disciplined group. Okay? And we were brought up, my generation, the baby boomers, were brought up very disciplined. If my brother Larry and I did anything bad during the day, my mother would say, "Wait till your dad gets home." And he would come home, he'd take off his belt, and he would chase us around the kitchen table, because that's the way discipline was.
Right.
In fact,
it didn't change much in the 80s, because I was an 80s baby, and that's how it rolled down too.
Yeah, he had this paddle, this fraternity paddle that he also used. So one night when he and my dad and mom were gone, my brother and I went to their closet, and we grabbed his fraternity paddle. And this was in late fall. We lived up in Ohio, and we took it outside and we buried it into the leaves. And then the next night it snowed, and we went back out that spring, and the paddle was gone. It was like a miracle to me. This is like, we really created this miracle. The paddle is gone. Right. But then, that was discipline back then. And we, I think, learned that it was crazy to do that. And we started to discipline our children a little bit differently. And now it's evolved into timeout and talking. And so, we're talking about how is it the evolution of discipline. That's what it is now. And that is improved. That's the way to do it, not the way that my dad did, chasing me around the table.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, as an 80s baby, that paddling or spanking or whatever you want to call it didn't change much for us as a kid, for myself. But then, of course, as you become a parent, and then you start looking at different things, and there's more understanding and knowledge. Now that that's a little bit different, and especially when it comes to this knowledge of, like, especially when a child is 3, you start that process of trying to the whole word no, and you try to try to guide this child away from something that may harm them, or guide them into whatever the case may be. And then this concept of, do they really understand? Does a 3-year-old understand what you're trying to communicate? How do you communicate effectively to a 3-year-old? Because it's at that cusp of 3 that they start to begin to assert themselves. They speak, they may talk, quote unquote, talk back. So then you have this back and forth dialogue of, like, what it means to be 3, and do they understand?
Well, let me give you a prime example that happened to me this weekend. We went to Austin to celebrate Grace's 3-year-old birthday party. Okay, so she just turned 3 this weekend. And so we had a chance really to observe her. Well, there were a couple times she said to her mother and to her brother, "I need my space." And she would go to the side of the couch with her book or with her iPad and be away from them. Well, what was interesting is her brother, who's 4.5 years old, understood that. And, there were times that he says, "I need my space too." And he would go to the other side of the couch. Now, they didn't make this up themselves. Their mother, at one point in time, said to both of them, "I need my space."
My space, right.
And so they learned from that.
Right.
And it really helps with the discipline. When one of them feels that they're getting a little crazy with the other one, they'll look over and, "I need my space," and they'll walk away. So you're right. That kind of that's how it's evolved over the years.
And that's a beautiful thing, that a 3-year-old can articulate themselves and then also be respected, because the other dynamic of discipline is having children have autonomy over themselves, over their bodies, over what their needs are. That was not something that, now I can only speak for me. I can't speak for nobody else's generation but my own, but I know that was definitely not something that I grew up with, where I could tell my mom I needed my space, because there was no such thing as needing space. Like, it was never, any of that type of conversation never went down.
So you asked me about the role of grandparents, and the good thing about grandparents is we can give them back. So in other words, we can spend time with them, but we can give them back. And
right.
I'll give you an example. A couple weekends ago, the ones here in town, the parents went away for the weekend, so we had the 2 kids, and so we did everything great. obviously we played the Wii with them, but then, we're in Arizona, so we went swimming, and then we went to the park, we went to the museum. We did all the things that grandparents do to help influence the kids, play soccer. And then on Saturday night, my wife said to Levi, she says, I want you to eat this food, because he's a very picky food eater. She says, I want you to eat this food. And if you don't eat this food, you're not going to be able to watch TV tonight. And he didn't want to do it. It became a major issue.
Right.
And so the next day we gave the kids back to the parents, and the parents said to the kids, well, how was your weekend? Well, Olivia said, it was great. We went to the museum, we played soccer. We had a wonderful time. The only thing Levi remembered was Grandma made me eat the stuff I didn't want to eat. He says, I'm so upset about that. So what happens is grandparents help create memories for kids. So, I'll tell you, in 20 years from now, Levi is going to remember that his grandma made him eat something he didn't want to eat. I mean, that's just one of those memories you create. And so, that's the role of grandparents, is that, take them and teach them as much as you can. One of the things that grandparents need to make sure they do whenever they're with their grandkids is they need to make sure they read books with their kids. Okay. Now, obviously, I want to read my book, but there's 100 other great books out there,
right?
That they can read. And again, I'm thinking about kids 2, 3, 4 years old that are influenced by grandparents. And it happened to me last weekend. The smartest thing to do is let the kid pick out the book. They got all these books here. Let them pick it out, so they become involved into it. And then, the one of the reasons that you need to do reading is because it helps bond with the child. That 10, 15 minutes that you have gives you that quiet moment. Like this weekend, they handed me the book. I'd start reading it, and they'd jump on my lap, and they would sit there, and we would bond for 10, 15 minutes. The other reason that you need to make sure that you're reading kids' books every single night is it supports listening skills. You and I both know as adults that listening skills really are our number one trait. The better we listen, the more we learn, the better we communicate. I mean, it's just something we have to learn.
Right.
And if you can teach them this at 2, 3, and 4 years old, how the supporting the listening skills by reading to them every night, that's going to work. It also helps with the cognitive and the language development. There's going to be words in a book they don't understand, so you can explain it to them, so that's a way for them to learn additional words. So you want to make sure that they just read books to learn more and more words. And then, another reason is the attention span. Little kids don't have a lot of attention span, but if you can sit there with them 10, 15, 20 minutes and concentrate on a subject, their attention span, it's the greatest thing. So if your listeners get anything else out of our conversation today, is please take the time to read these kids' books and spend time with them, because that really is a bonding way. So that's my advice.
What is the goal for this book? Because this book is very, the illustration is awesome, and it's very easy for, like you said, to spend that time. And if your grandchildren or a parent wants to use that book to read to their children, what is the goal of your book?
Well, the book is really based on true story. Okay. In other words, all the pictures that are in the book are pictures that I had taken of the kids. Like the cover of the book is Levi and Jackson in the bathtub. Well, that's a picture that I took of them in the bathtub, and then the illustrator turned it into a cartoon. So it's a true story, and I am sure that this sharing problem and responsibility problem affects every family in the world, not just mine. I mean, I'm sure that every family can talk about when their kids aren't sharing and so forth. So that's the purpose of it, is to start that conversation with your kids, on how to share.
And has your grandchildren listened, or have you read them the book?
Well, what's interesting is over Thanksgiving, I had 4 of them here, and one night, Olivia, who just turned 9, grabbed the book and grabbed her 3 siblings and cousins. And for some reason, they went underneath my desk, and she started reading the book. They didn't know I was sitting at the side, kind of listening to it. And so as she was reading the book, Levi says, that's me in the bathtub. And Jackson says, that's me with my dinosaurs. So you could just see that they were really enthralled in it. And then a couple of weeks ago, Olivia's class, they had to bring in a book and dress up as a character in the book and kind of read it to their classmates. Well, yeah, on one of the pages where she goes to the zoo with the grandmother and Jordan, that she's wearing this pink dress. So she got the pink dress out of her closet and she took the book in and she dressed up as herself and read the book to her class. So, that kind of stuff is just priceless. I can't buy that.
Right. And then that's another memory that you're leaving with them that they'll have forever to cherish, that they were a part of something that was a part of them, something that they didn't even realize they were helping to create. But then in the same token, like, this is a part of their history. They can look back, they can touch it, they can feel it. It's something they can touch, it's tangible.
Well, what's interesting is Olivia came to me last week and she says, I got an idea of a book I want us to write that says, I don't want to turn 10, because she just turned 9. I said, Olivia, what kind of ideas do you have that you want to write a book that says, I don't want to turn 10? She said, well, I've been worrying about a bunch of stuff lately. She says, I'm going to get my driver's license when I'm 16. I said, that's 7 years away. Why are you worrying about it now? She says, I don't know, but I'm really thinking about it. And she says, and then I got to go pick out a college when I graduated at 18. I said, what are you worrying about now? She says, well, I've kind of eliminated the college. Here's the kind of colleges I want to go to. She says, but I really don't want to make those decisions. She says, I'm just 9 years old. I don't want to have to worry about that stuff now. She says, I think that would be a great topic for I don't want to turn 10, because I really don't want to turn 10.
Wow. I'll tell you, these children are so advanced in their thought process and what they think about and what's on their plate.
Oh, yeah. And when you think about it, a lot of that comes from how you interact and get kids to read books. Okay. Because, you want to, what you want to always think about as a parent and as a grandparent, it's necessary to teach children how to think. Not what to think, but it's necessary to teach them how to think. And if you take that attitude, as they're growing up, even as they're driving nuts and so forth, you want to keep thinking, how can I teach them to think? So like when you're reading a book, what you want to do is before you even read the book, you want to ask the kid, what do you think is going to happen in this book? Get them involved quickly. What do you think? Here's you picked out the book. We're sitting on my lap. What do you think is going to happen in this book? And start to have them start thinking again. They'll come up with their own way of thinking, but you want to start always thinking. Then as you're reading the books, these kids, you want to say to them, what are the characters in the books? Who are they? Or what is the setting? Let them keep thinking through the book, as you're reading through it. And then ask them, does anything in this book sound familiar to you? Have you ever gone through it? Is this related to you? And then obviously when you're done with the book, what is your favorite part of the book and why did you like it so much? So, one of our roles as adults, and I'm realizing this as I get older and older, is we've got to teach, we've got to get kids to start thinking, beyond, just everything that they do all day long.
That is so true. I'm glad that you said that. So now that you've gotten this first children's book out of the way, are we going to see more children's books? Because you tell the story very, very well, easy to read, and from a child's perspective that they can learn as well. So do you have any other books that you're brewing or hoping to come out soon?
Well, I'm working on I Don't Want to Turn 4. Okay. And then Olivia says she wants to work on with me I Don't Want to Turn 10. So we'll probably start a series. I don't want to turn 4. I don't want to turn 5. Because, as you well know, as a parent, these different years, something different interacts with kids' head.
Every year, something definitely opens up in their learning. It's almost like they get activated with some type of new lesson or new thought process that they have to focus on.
I talked about the questions that you should ask your kids, as you're reading a book, but there's one question that I think we should all ask our kids every day, whether it's at dinner, whether it's, at reading a book. And that is, what did you do today that was nice to someone else? Okay? That's a question. The first time you ask that question, they're going to look at you like, I don't know what you're talking about. But, as you ask it every night, then all of a sudden, it may be their siblings that they become nicer to. I mean, kids, but what did you do today that was nice to someone else? Because if we can get that ingrained into this generation's mind, that we as America have got to help each other.
Right.
And if we can get that ingrained in their mind, what did you do today that was nice to someone else? I think, again, I told you, I think it's the greatest generation. I think this will put them over the top.
Yeah, it's that social interaction and that social responsibility of thinking again, and that's one of the book's purposes of thinking of outside of yourself, that it's not just about you, it's about how you interact with other people. And asking that question will help that in every regard, because sometimes even as adults we need that reminder as well. What are we doing to make this world a better place for someone else? Like, how are we interacting with someone else? And when we leave someone, and that's one of my biggest things with my children, I tell them, when you leave someone's presence, like, how would you want them to see you? How would you want them to interact and feel the way that you left them? And that's important as well, too.
Yeah, again, I said that one of the reasons I wrote this book was because I wanted to get grandparents more involved in kids' lives. When you think about it, you only have 18 years, and that goes quickly. It was a couple, before you know it, 18 years is over. These decades have gone very quickly for me. I don't know if they're going fast for you, but all of a sudden you're getting old. So the 18 years goes fast, and so you've got to make sure as a grandparent, they're only young once, and you got to get there. And then as a grandparent, you're only one young once too. I mean, the other scary thing is, you could be here today and gone tomorrow as a grandparent. So
Right.
You've got to maximize your interaction with these kids every single day. The future is unpredictable. So you got to live for today and teach them for today and, mold them for today. You need to become part of the routine. Again, when I was a kid, I was lucky. My uncle was up the street, my grandmother was around the corner. You had the same opportunity in your life, but in today's world, you're not. You got to force yourself to somehow become part of the routine. Now, we did it with the dinosaurs, but there's got to be other things, that your listeners can do to become a part of the routine with their kids, because you do have an influence. I mean,
Right.
You can remember, I'm sure you can tell plenty of stories that the grandparents told you or did with you that you still remember. So those are the kinds of influence, hopefully they don't only remember the bad food that we made them eat, but they've got other things.
That happens.
And don't be afraid to initiate. Again, 2, 3, 4-year-old kids, they're not going to initiate the call you. You got to go after them. So, it's the role of grandparents to get involved and to influence and make this the best generation yet.
And I'm grateful that you said that, because, a lot of parents need to hear that. And as a grandparent, hearing you say that, I mean, I'm not a grandparent, but as you being a grandparent, saying that is really hopeful that parents feel that support from their parents, and that you supporting the children really does support the parent. And so that's helpful too, knowing that they have another positive influence that they can call, not just on birthdays and not just on holidays, that grandparents take that initiative, like you said, to really be interactive with their grandchildren. And that's really, really refreshing to hear. And I'm hoping that if you're listening and you're a grandparent and you may not have done the best job as far as being interactive, maybe you dropped the ball a little bit because you were expecting, again, a child or the parents of the child to do that first step, just to take that initiative, because again, doing that, and even the parent seeing that, supports the parent too as well. Because I know as a parent, seeing grandparents step up and do that and be that love and that, again, that influence is very much helpful to me as a parent.
And that's really one of my missions, because I see my generation of baby boomers, some of us are very involved, but there's a good portion of us that said, okay, I raised my kids,
Right,
it's their responsibility. I got other things to do with the rest of my life, and that's not the right attitude as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we've got so much that we can to teach these younger kids, but there's a whole part of our generation that says, I'm done. It's your responsibility. So I guess what the real message is, when you love, you will teach others how to love. And that's what grandparents need to do. When they show their love for these kids, those kids are going to learn how to love others. And so that's the thing we have to keep in our mind, is why we have to interact with these little ones.
I love that. And if there was a way, if you have social media or any way for other people to get involved to find out what you're doing to keep abreast. So when you drop number 4 of I don't want to be 4, they can grab a hold to that. How can they find you?
Oh, they can come to my websites, grampsjeffrey.com or I don't want to turn 3.com. Yeah, so I've got a couple websites. I'm on all the social media, but I would encourage you, please, I'd like to talk to people individually. Email me at grampsjeffrey@gmail.com. That's grampsjeffrey@gmail.com. And I'd love to talk to you further about what this is all about and how we, as the older generation, are on a mission that we can bring these kids along.
I love that. And if you're listening, I know sometimes some of my listeners are listening and they're working out or they're doing something that's moving, active, driving, whatever the case may be. Remember, we will keep all of that information in the show notes so that you can click on it and then make sure that you're able to email Gramps, that you're also able to go onto the websites, because again, we need more grandparents joining the forces of really being there for their grandchildren. And also, again, like I said, plenty of times that also helps to support the parents as well. And again, the biggest issue is making sure that children are able to see themselves as they grow older and learn those key lessons that they need so that they can be really great at social interacting with each other and just being better humans, to be honest with you. A lot of these conversations about, are you being nice to other people or how are you looking? Like, these are things that we need as a baseline so that, again, with all the smarts, technology, and all of these things that we have, we can make this new generation, one of the best.
So yeah, when you can find my book on Amazon, on Barnes and Noble, on all the major websites on the internet. So feel free to pick it up. And then once you get it, call me and let's talk about it.
Absolutely. Gramps, thank you so much for being a part of our amazing conversation in our community, because we are always about trying to find ways to support other creatives, and that could be authors and any type of creative. And also when it has a message that aligns with being better, like being better every single day. And that's what we're here for, to make sure that we are better. You might have been saying to yourself, well, I'm not a parent, I'm not a grandparent, but maybe in the future you will. But even if you're not, at the end of the day, give this to someone else that's a parent. Share the book with another child. Children love books. Quiet as it's kept, children absolutely love books. And so if you do nothing else, give this book to a child as well. My children, they get books all the time. We are at Barnes and Nobles very much faithfully. They know me by name there. I'm not ashamed of that. We have little bookworms. They love to soak up that energy and all the new adventures that they can learn in books. And really, that's what books are. Books are an adventure, whether they're teaching you through somebody else's story. They're adventures.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
Thank you as always for joining me, and I know that even in the deepest or joyful conversations, that there's something we can learn and apply. Until next time, I hope that you are doing better. If not, we will be back to talk some more and handle it. Peace to you and yours. Stay grounded.